kicks down the door. "Release the princess, you fiends," he shouts. Mercenaries swarm him from every direction. The air rings with the clash of steel. Brunt swings his broadsword in a mighty arc, cutting through muscle and shattering bone. Within moments, the room is transformed into an abattoir of severed heads and limbs. Are your D&D combats this fast and exciting? If not, stay tuned and we'll show you 5 ways to speed up combat on today's DungeonCraft. Welcome to DungeonCraft. I'm Professor DungeonMaster, coming to you from beautiful Dungeon University, wearing my +1 tweed jacket of insight, and today we're going to discuss a number of ways to speed up combat. Do you find your combats are dragging on? Is one combat encounter taking up more than an hour? If so, this video might be for you. Even if you're experienced, this video might have a couple of things that you might not have thought of. So I'm leaving out the most obvious thing, which is controlling the size of your group. A group of 6 people making decisions and rolling dice will take twice as long as a group of 3. But if you have a problem like me, where I have 6 to 8 players in any given session and they just keep showing up, this is a good video. I was going to make a countdown, but then I have to sort of prioritize them to reveal the big one at the end, and I really wanted them to be more accessible. I have the more accessible ones up front, the ones that don't change the rules, so whether you play 5e or 1st or Pathfinder, you can use them because they're completely hands off the rules. Once we get to 4 and 5, it's going to be a little more controversial because I'm going to suggest monkeying around with the rules a little bit. The first thing you can do to speed up combat, include timers. For some reason, most Dungeons & Dragons games look like this. The Dungeon Master speaks to each player, going clockwise, asks them what they want to do, has them roll the dice, and resolves that action before moving to the next person. Like, Tom, what do you want to do? Oh, hit the orc with your sword. Okay, roll the die. What'd you get? Oh, a 4. Sorry, Tom, you missed. Now, Veronica, what do you want to do? This is boring because, let's face it, waiting for your turn in any game is boring. And it's even worse because you've always got a number of personalities, like the person that asks a whole bunch of clarifying questions. Is it an arch ceiling or a flat ceiling? What's on the goblin's shield? Is this the same goblin tribe we encountered 2 adventures ago? There's the guy that doesn't think about what he wants to do until it's his turn. So like 8 minutes went around as you went around the whole thing, and they haven't thought of anything. There's the person who always wants to hold their attack till everyone else has done their attack. And the person that when you ask them, what do you want to do, they say, what can I do? All of these players are conspiring to make your game drag on, and I have a solution. Timers. This is the timer to the game Scattergories. There are 3 settings on the back. This one I'm using is a 90-second timer. So did you ever see a movie with a ticking bomb and it's really tense? Same concept. In my game, I'll give a quick description of the room. You kick in the door, you see a medium-sized guard room. It contains a half dozen goblins. They've got rusty knives, and they're ready to kill you. What do you do? And then I start the timer. They've got 90 seconds to make up their minds. And everyone shouts out what they want to do at once. There's no waiting for your turn. There's no looking up spell effects and rule books. I mean, I guess you can do it, but there's a lot of flipping and possible paper cuts involved. And if you want me to describe architecture goblin fashion, I'll do it, but time is running out. And if you haven't acted by the time the timer goes off, you lose your turn. Everyone rolls their attack and damage dice at the end of the round. I'll do a countdown. 3, 2, 1, and everyone goes at the same time. Again, no waiting around for your turn. Some folks will say this is very stressful, and it is because combat is stressful. Let's face it, a combat round is 6 seconds. You don't have a lot of time to survey your surroundings and make complex plans. Scattergories timers are available everywhere. I mean, I have a couple of copies of Scattergories in my house. I find them all the time in thrift stores and at yard sales. You can get them for anywhere from $3 to $5. You can order one of these timers from Amazon.com and just get the timer itself. It's probably about $4 or $5. Number 2, very simple. Roll your hit roll and your damage die at the same time. If you're using a D8, for example, just toss the dice and say, I hit armor class 14 for 4 points of damage. Or, if you were to roll a 1, your 4 damage wouldn't count. Especially if you've got like a large group of 6 or 8 people, that's just common courtesy to do the other people so we can get through your turn and they can get to their turn, which is the most fun part of the game for them. 3. Don't roll for monster damage. Watching a Dungeon Master roll a bunch of dice is boring. My advice is roll to hit for the monsters, but then when it comes to rolling damage, just average out what their damage is and assign it. So an orc does d12 plus 3. That's an average of 9.5 hit points of damage per hit. So just say you took 9 points of damage. The players aren't even going to really notice it. It's going to go so fast. Also, you can adjust it depending on the point of the adventure. I have that episode on story structure, using 3-act story structure in an adventure. And in Act 1, you don't want your player characters to die because they're the heroes of the story, right? So early on, the orcs do 4 or 5 hit points of damage. And in the middle, they do 9 or 10 hit points damage. And towards the end, with the big boss or whatever, that you can actually roll out. But if it's just an orc, just average it out and move on with the game. There's already a game called The 13th Age, which is a derivation of Dungeons & Dragons. A lot of the designers who worked on it worked on D&D 3 and 3.5. And they've already come to this same conclusion. There's really no reason to roll out the dice over and over again. And along these lines, don't roll for the non-player characters' damage either. Toss a 20-sided die for them, but just have them do average damage as well. The only thing more boring than watching the DM calculate monster damage is watching them roll for the monsters and the non-player characters. Non-player characters are just window dressing. They're just the supporting cast. Just have them do average damage and move on. 4. Simplify initiative. Personally, I feel initiative isn't really necessary. I have a video called No More Initiative where I explain the virtues of just doing away with it altogether. It really speeds up combat and makes it more intense, but I realize that's kind of radical for some people, so if I could make another suggestion, simple group initiative. Roll a 20-sided die, highest side wins. I've seen other videos and read blogs where people defend the current 5e initiative system. They'll say it's not really that hard, you get someone to help you keep track of it, it only takes a couple of minutes, but in my opinion that's 2 minutes too long. Who goes first in the Super Bowl is decided by a 2-second coin toss. To me, individual initiative seems like getting all the kids in the class into size order. I just don't associate it with an exciting action game. Rolling a d20 is fast, it takes 2 seconds, it's unpredictable, it adds that random element of excitement to the game. It's exciting when the player characters win in a tense situation and that big cheer goes up. It's one of the more fun aspects of the game. And it's one of the only times where the players are really working as a team. When they toss that die, everyone's going to stop what they're doing and look at that die roll. And my final way to speed up combat, and probably the most controversial, is going to be lower hit points. Lower hit points for monsters, lower hit points for characters, lower hit points for everything.
You know how in the Lord of the Rings movies, Legolas can kill orcs with just one shot through the eye and then shoot a guy off a staircase? But in D&D, you really can't do that because orcs have 15 hit points. Or in Conan novels, how Conan can be surrounded by opponents but then hack them all to pieces, each with a single blow. If you want fast cinematic combat, the solution is simple. Just reduce the monster's hit points. In my games, a standard goblin has 3 hit points. A standard orc, 4. A mercenary, 5. This means the players can have the excitement of fighting hordes of monsters and killing most of them with one shot. The game moves much faster with fewer half-dead monsters for the DungeonMaster to keep track of. But I don't stop there, because I believe in lowering the player characters' hit points as well. Let's face it, both D&D and Pathfinder suffer from scalability problems. The higher characters progress in levels, the more invincible they become, and the more difficult it becomes to challenge them. And hit points are a big part of this problem. Take a fighter, for example. Let's imagine we create an average first-level fighter. They begin with 10 hit points. But not really, because if you're playing a fighter, you're going to assign one of your higher ability scores to Constitution. Let's say it's a +2. Thereafter, he'll gain 5.5 plus 2 hit points per level on average. That means 15 hit points every 2 levels, which means 27 hit points at 3rd level, 52 at 5th level, and at 9th level he'll have 83 hit points, and will essentially be a walking tank. That's not even considering his access to paladins and clerics, and their healing spells, and healing staves, and healing salves, and healing ointments, and potions of healing, and proficiencies like Second Wind that allow him to recover hit points. Back as far as the 80s, other games like Warhammer Fantasy caught on to D&D's scalability problem. In Warhammer, hit points, called wounds, cap out at 10 to 12. More recent D&D variants like Dungeon World cap hit points as well. Characters in Dungeon World add their class hit die to their constitution, so a fighter with a constitution of 15 would have 25 hit points, and these hit points will never increase. So here's my suggestion. Cap hit points at 3rd level. That means without constitution bonuses, the average fighter will have 22 hit points, clerics and rogues will have 17, and wizards will have 13. Of course, you're going to have to modify spell damage and monster damage, but it's not as hard as you might think. For spells that cause damage, simply cut the damage dice in half, instead of a fireball doing 8d6 hit points of damage, have it do 4d6. That's still an average of 14 hit points, still enough to nuke a room full of average monsters. With monsters, just lower the damage range. Instead of a goblin doing d6 plus 2 hit points of damage, have it just do d6. Instead of an orc doing d12 plus 3 damage, just have it do d8. Or if it's a really tough orc, d8 plus 2. Instead of a dragon's breath doing 18d6 damage, have it just do 6d6 damage. Instead of its bite doing 2d10 plus 8 damage, have it just do 2d6, and reduce all other monster damage in proportion.
Hit points extends D&D and Pathfinder games to, in my opinion, unreasonable lengths. And I can tell you as a game designer, it's one of the reasons that you find so little material for player characters who are 10th level and above. At that point, nothing can really hurt or kill them. Alright, so these techniques have worked for me for many years. I hope you try some of them out, even the more radical ones. And I hope you keep watching DungeonCraft. If you like these ideas, click like. Even if you don't like the ideas, click like anyway. It's not that you're endorsing them, it's just that you think the show is good. If you have other ideas on how to speed up combat, I would love to read about them in the comments below. And don't forget to join the group on Facebook. Once again, this is Professor DungeonMaster for DungeonCraft. Thanks for watching. I'll see you at the table, and may all your future rolls be 20s.